In this video, we will work with user repository and we will add into that user repository interface the find by user ID function. So I'll copy the function name and I will go to user repository. I have defined it here at the top and I open its declaration. And this is my interface, which at this moment extends CRUD repository interface. So we have one method added here, find by email, and we will add one more method which will return also user entity, and it's going to be called find by user ID. And this method needs to accept the user ID, which is a public user ID. This is why it is a string value and not a lone value. If I were to query database by user ID, which is a database auto increment record ID, that database record ID will most likely be lone, but this one is user ID. And I'll walk you through why did I name it find by user ID. Remember that Spring Data GPA simplifies the database communication for us very much. All we need to do is to remember how to properly name these methods, and these methods are also called query methods because the way you are going to name this method, Spring Data GPA is going to compose an SQL query and execute that query against the database. So first of all, because we want to select a record, we use find. And this is a keyword. You cannot use a different word, like for example, locate or extract. You have to use find. And then we need to provide a criteria, find a record by which field. So this is why the next keyword in my method name is by, and then the field name by which I want that SQL query to find my record in the database. So if I bring up my database, here it is, and I will run a describe command, describe users, to look up the database table structure, I'll see that I have a field name which is user ID. This is why my method name has find by user ID. I don't use the underscore. If I were to look by email, I would create my method name find by email. And if I were to look by last name, I would create the method find by last name. Something like this. I'll copy it and paste it here, and then I would use find by last name, and then as a method argument I would need to provide a last name. So I would remove the user ID and we'll have to provide the last name here like this, but we don't need this method at this time, so I will delete it. Okay, so by adding this method to my interface, find by user ID, I have the entire functionality ready for me. So now I should be able to save my work and then run this application. And when this method is called find by user ID, Spring Data GPA will do all the work for me. It will create a SQL query. It will connect to the database using the database connection details provided in application properties file. We have it here under resources, application properties, and it will find that record. And if the record is found, it will create user entity object for us, and it will return it back to our user service implementation, and we will use that user entity object to work with it. So let me save this and let's run this application and see if it works.